Okay, I hope I'm audible to all students who are attending this lecture of Introductory Macroeconomics. We intend to start with a new module in our lectures on Introductory Macroeconomics. This is called as the Keynesian economy. Okay, after having done the lectures on the classical macroeconomics, we now look at the Keynesian economy. Okay, now there are three markets which we are going to focus on from now onwards. One is the goods market, one is the goods market, one is the labor market, and the next market which we are going to study in depth is the money market. Before moving forward, I want to make one thing clear to all my students that when we talk about Keynesian economy, this topic is also the first topic of my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course. So the Keynesian economy topic is a part of both the introductory macroeconomics course as well as intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course. It's a common topic which I do in both these courses. So if you have taken up my introductory macroeconomics course, you will find this topic in the list of topics. If you have taken my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course, that also includes this topic. It's a common topic shared by both introductory and intermediate macroeconomics. Okay, now in this particular lecture, I'm going to focus primarily on the goods market and deriving the equilibrium in the goods market. Labor market is something which I cover. This is something I cover in my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course when I derive the aggregate supply curve. So in my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course, I cover the labor market. Money market, we have already had lectures on quantity theory of money and money market equilibrium. Okay, but I will cover money market in more depth. I cover this in more depth again in my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course. In my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course. So the reason for devoting some time to this is just to make all my students clear. We are starting with the goods market in this lecture and we are going to do it in depth. Labor market and money market are covered in more depth in my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course. Having said that, I'm repeating again, goods market is also something which I cover in both introductory macroeconomics as well as intermediate macroeconomics. Okay, so now let's look into the goods market. So I quickly erase all this off and now let's give the heading. So before writing the heading and the details, I can further write that the reference I follow for my lectures on Keynesian economy, the reference book I prefer to follow is Dornbusch Fisher. Okay, so you will find this as chapter 9 and 10 of Dornbusch Fisher. Macroeconomics by Dornbusch and Fisher. This is a standard textbook for macroeconomics. Okay. Students can check out the latest edition of this book. Okay. But as per the edition I have, this is chapter 9 and chapter 10. If you're carrying a different edition of this book, check out for the topic income and spending, basically. In the list of topics, you can check out for income and spending. So whatever content I'm discussing with all students in this lecture is something which you will find in under the heading income and spending. Okay, now let's directly move to the main lecture now. So all students can now write goods market. So the first market we are looking at in macroeconomics is the goods market. And we can quickly write that in the goods market, the demand comes from the households, firms, government, and the rest of the world. Whereas the supply comes from the firms. So when we talk about the goods market, essentially the demand is coming from the households. Okay, so I'm writing the equation, a very standard macroeconomic equation for aggregate demand. So I can write define aggregate demand as AD is equal to demand is coming from households in the form of consumption. Households demand consumption expenditure. Demand is also coming from the firms in the form of investment. Firms borrow money from the banks for investment. Okay. Demand also comes from the government in the form of government expenditure. Government also borrows to finance its deficits, budget deficits. The government also borrows to finance its own expenditures of building bridges, roads, public parks, etc. And the demand is also coming from the rest of the world. Now, rest of the world includes the foreign economies. Foreigners buy our goods, which we call as exports, but we also buy foreign goods, so we subtract imports. Now, why am I adding exports? The reason I'm adding exports is because it is the demand for our goods by the foreigners. Why am I subtracting imports? Because it is the demand for foreign goods by us. So I'm writing it. So I can write this is the demand by the households. This is the demand by the households. This is the demand by the firms. This represents the demand by the government. X represents exports, which is demand for domestic goods by the foreigners. M represents imports, which is the demand for foreign goods by the domestic residents. Okay, so we are adding all those demands which are for the domestic goods, and we are subtracting all those demands which are for the foreign goods. Okay, so this is our aggregate demand function. Okay, and now, so this is something called as my actual aggregate demand. So I can write that this equation represents my actual aggregate demand in the economy. Actual aggregate demand. And what is my planned aggregate demand? Okay, now whatever output as firm I plan to produce, is equal to my planned aggregate demand. I have an aggregate demand I planned for the future. That what is going to be the aggregate demand in the future? I am going to start producing my output to meet that planned aggregate demand. So I can write, if I erase the initial part, I'm erasing the topic as we are all aware about the topic we are doing. So on the top, I can write that my planned aggregate demand, is equal to Y, which is my output. Y denotes my output. The output I produce is equal to the planned aggregate demand, what I plan or expect in the future. Okay, now when is the goods market in equilibrium? Now we can all write that. We can write the next point. The goods market is in equilibrium. The goods market is in equilibrium when the actual aggregate demand is equal to the planned aggregate demand, where planned aggregate demand is equal to output. So this is the condition for goods market to be in equilibrium. Whatever I plan meets the actual. The output I produce should be exactly equal to the actual aggregate demand. So I'm repeating it again. When do I say that the goods market is in equilibrium? The goods market is in equilibrium when the output I plan to produce is exactly equal to the actual aggregate demand. If the output exceeds the actual aggregate demand or is less than the actual aggregate demand, then my goods market is in disequilibrium. It is in equilibrium only when the output I plan to produce given by my planned aggregate demand matches or equals the actual aggregate demand in the economy. Okay, now let's go step by step. If you look at the actual aggregate demand equation, currently it is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Now I'm going to talk about the open, in my lectures on open economy, I'll talk about exports and imports. So currently, I am assuming that the economy is closed. When I say that the economy is closed, there are no exports and imports. And I'm just doing it for simplicity. In my lectures on open economy models, which I do in my intermediate macroeconomics part 1 course, we will also incorporate the possibility of the economy's trading by having balance of payments, export and imports. But right now I am excluding this part and I am only focusing on the three components still here, C, I and G. So let's first of all pick up the consumption function. Now assume for simplicity that there is no firm and there is no government. Suppose the demand is only coming from consumption. So let me erase all this off and I can write case 1. Suppose the demand in the economy, suppose the aggregate demand comes only from the households. Suppose the aggregate demand comes only from the households. That is, there is no investment right now, we are assuming, and no government expenditure. There is no investment and no government expenditure. Okay, so I can write what is my aggregate demand function. So my aggregate demand will only be equal to C, which is my consumption. And now let's define the consumption function. So define the consumption function, define the Keynes consumption function. Define the Keynes consumption function as C is equal to C bar plus CY, where capital C denotes my consumption, Y denotes my income, C bar denotes autonomous consumption, and so what is autonomous consumption? We can write autonomous consumption is that level of consumption. It is that level of consumption when income is equal to 0. That is when y is equal to 0. If I put y equal to 0 in this, it implies my C will be equal to C bar. So autonomous consumption is that level of consumption which pertains when your level of income is 0. Now, what is small c? Small c denotes the marginal propensity to consume. Small c denotes the marginal propensity to consume, which in the short form we can call as MPC. Okay, so what does marginal propensity to consume capture? So I can write that marginal propensity to consume is also nothing but change in C by change in Y, or to be more exact, it is the derivative of the consumption function with respect to income. When I take the derivative of the consumption function with respect to income, I get something called the marginal propensity to consume. So it captures, so I can write MPC captures that, or I can write MPC captures by how much the consumption goes up, by how much the consumption goes up when income goes up by $1. So if your income goes up by $1, by how much will your consumption go up? For example, if I say that MPC is equal to 0.8, what does that mean? So if I write it here, for example, MPC equal to 0.8 means that if the income goes up, if the income goes up by $1, consumption goes up by $0.8 or 80 cents. Consumption goes up by $0.8 or 80 cents. Okay, and students can also write that your marginal propensity to consume, which is small c. So I can write, instead of MPC, let me use small c only everywhere. Let's be consistent in our symbols. So MPC is small c, okay? So small c, which is my MPC, always lies between 0 and 1. It always lies between 0 and 1. It cannot exceed 1 because you cannot consume more than your increase in income, and it cannot be less than 0 because obviously when your income goes up, your consumption will go up. So I can write a point here as a note that MPC cannot exceed 1 since you cannot consume more than your increase in income. You cannot consume more than your increase in income. For example, if my income goes up by $1, I can't increase my consumption by more than $1. If my income goes up by $1, my consumption can increase at max by $1, but not more than that. I cannot increase my consumption more than my increase in income, because when I'm increasing income, then income is consumed also, it's saved also. All of us know that income in the economy is consumed and saved. So I can write that equation also. Income is either consumed and or saved. So y is equal to c plus s. I'm going to write this equation again to derive the savings function in a few minutes. But we all know that income is either consumed or saved. That means when your income goes up, you can't consume more than your increase in income. Okay. And similarly, c cannot be less than 0. I can write this also. If I erase the initial part, since we are all familiar with the case we are doing. So this was within the node point 1, within the node point 2. Consumption cannot be less than 0, since when income goes up, consumption must also go up. That is, when income increases, consumption cannot decrease. See, less than 0 means consumption is decreasing. That's not possible. When your income goes up, consumption will go up, because we know that, again, the reason is since income is equal to consumption plus savings, when income goes up, consumption must also go up. If I say that marginal propensity to consume is less than 0, I am saying that when income goes up, consumption is going down. That's not possible. When income goes up, consumption must also go up. When you earn more, you also spend more. It's not possible that you are earning more and now you're spending less. That's not rational behavior. When you earn more, when your income goes up, you also spend more. Your consumption goes up. So marginal propensity to consume cannot be less than 0, and it cannot be more than 1. Hence, given by this argument, it should lie between 0 and 1, including 0 and 1, which are the extreme cases. Okay, and now let's derive the savings function. So till now we have talked about consumption. Let's now talk about the other side of the coin, which is savings. So if I erase all this off, now we know that income is equal to consumption plus savings, which implies, put the value of consumption. What is consumption? It is C bar plus CY. Consumption is C bar plus CY. That means y minus cy is equal to, or I can also take c bar to the left hand side as well. So basically I've taken c bar to this side, I've taken cy to this side, so I get y minus c bar is equal to s, so which implies minus c bar plus, within this, guys, I can take y common. So it leaves me with 1 minus c times y is equal to s. Therefore, I can say define the savings function as, s is equal to minus c bar plus 1 minus cy, where minus c bar denotes the level of this savings. That is, the level of savings the level of savings when income is equal to 0. Remember, C bar was autonomous consumption, which means that level of consumption when your income is 0. Corresponding to that, minus C bar is your level of dis savings, which means that level of savings when your income is 0. It means, guys, when your income is 0, your savings is negative. So I can write that when income is 0, savings is minus C bar. Savings are negative means you are borrowing. When your income is 0, you are borrowing money to finance consumption. So I can say that this means that when income is 0, the consumer borrows to finance its consumption. Borrowing means negative savings. So I can write in the bracket borrowings. Your savings is negative, right? When your savings is negative, it means you are borrowing money. You are borrowing money to finance your consumption. Okay. And what is 1 minus C? So I can write here 1 minus C denotes marginal propensity to save. It denotes marginal propensity to save, short form MPS. So I can say that mathematically, MPS is nothing but the derivative of your savings function with respect to income, which captures, I can write, which captures that if your income, let me write income only, if the income goes up by $1, by how much will the savings go up? By how much will the savings go up? So MPS is going to capture that if your income goes up by $1 more, by how much will your savings go up? For example, if my MPS is 0.2, it means that if my income goes up by $1, my savings go up by $0.2 or 20 cents. $0.2 or 20 cents. This is what is meant by interpreting the marginal propensity to save. And now the next important point, just like MPC lies between 0 and 1, MPS also lies between 0 and 1. MPS also lies between 0 and 1. Okay, so MPS, again, it cannot exceed 1 for the same reason like MPC cannot exceed 1. Why can't MPS exceed 1? MPS cannot exceed 1 because you cannot consume more, you cannot save more than your increase in income. So again, I can write the same reason here on the left hand side. Again, I can write the same reason here that MPS cannot exceed 1 since you cannot save more than your increase in income. You simply cannot save more than your increase in income. If your income increases by $1, you cannot save more than $1. At max, you can save that $1, but you can't save more than $1. I cannot say that my income has gone up by $1, but my savings have gone up by $2. That's not rational. That's not possible. If my income goes up by $1, my savings can go up by at max $1, but not more than that. And MPS cannot be less than 0 also. Since an increase in income must lead to since an increase in income cannot lead to a fall in savings. An increase in income cannot lead to a fall in savings. Obviously, if I say that MPS is less than 0, it means what? MPS less than 0 means my income is going up, but my savings is going down. Is that possible? No. It's not possible that your income goes up, but your savings are going down. When your income goes up, your savings also go up. Why? Because we know that income is consumed and saved. When income goes up, savings will go up. I can't say that income is going up, but savings is going down. In fact, when income goes up, both consumption and savings go up. When the left-hand side goes up, the right-hand side must also go up to maintain the equality. That means my MPC and MPS both cannot be less than 0. So I hope students have understood this. So if I erase all this off now, I can now write that since income is either consumed or saved, this implies change in income is also equal to change in consumption plus change in savings. If income is equal to consumption plus savings, then change in income must also be equal to change in consumption plus change in savings. Dividing both sides of the above equation by delta y, dividing both sides of the above equation by delta y, I get delta y by delta y as delta c by delta y plus delta s by delta y. Now delta y cancel, I get 1. Delta c by delta y mathematically is the formula for marginal propensity to consume. Delta s by delta y is nothing but the formula for marginal propensity to save. Delta here means the change. In the bracket, I can write delta. This is delta symbol, which captures the change. So I can say that the sum of MPC and MPS should be equal to 1. So for example, if I am given that my marginal propensity to consume is 0.75, how do I interpret it? If my income goes up by $1, my consumption goes up by $0.75 or 75 cents. Can I calculate MPS? What will MPS be? Therefore, my MPS will be 1 minus MPC, which is 1 minus 0.75, which is 0.25. How do I interpret this? MPS equal to 0.25 means that if my income goes up by $1, my savings go up by $0.25 or 25 cents. So students should know how to calculate MPC from MPS or MPS from MPC. You should know this equation very well. Okay, so I hope all students are clear till here. Then I can also derive something called as average propensity to consume and average propensity to save. So if I erase all this off, I can also write that we know that income is either consumed or saved. Dividing both sides of the above equation, by y, I get, if I divide the left hand side, I get y by y is equal to c by y plus s by y. Y and y cancel, I get 1. Consumption by income is called as average propensity to consume. Savings by income is called as average propensity to save. So I can write define APC as C by Y, which is consumption per unit of income. Consumption per unit of income. And define APS as S by Y, which is savings per unit of income. Savings per unit of income. So I can write, for example, if APC is 0.8, it means that 80% of the income is consumed. 80% of the income is consumed. So if APC is given, guys, can I calculate APS? We know that APC plus APS should be equal to 1. So how much will APS be? Therefore, my APS will be 1 minus APC, which is 1 minus 0.8, which is 0.2. This means that, how do I interpret this? This means that 20% of the income is saved. 20% of the income is saved. So when students are given APC, you should know how to calculate APS. And when you are given APS, you should know how to calculate APC. Just use this equation that the sum of APC and APS should be equal to 1. And please do not get confused in the interpretations of APC and MPC. So if I quickly write it here, APC equal to 0.8 means 80% of the income is consumed. MPC equal to 0.8 means 80% of increase in income is consumed. 80% of increase in income is consumed. So students should be comfortable with the difference between the interpretations. Remember, as economists, interpretations are very important. Students should not only be comfortable in my lectures on the math part, but you should also know how to interpret the results. So when I say APC is 0.8, 80% of the income is consumed. But MPC equal to 0.8 means 80% of the increase in income is consumed. Similarly, we can do for APS and MPS. Okay, now we are going to look at the diagrams now for the consumption function and the savings function. So I hope all students are clear till here and have no doubts. So let's now erase all this and look at the diagram for the consumption function and how the goods market is in equilibrium given the consumption function. So this is goods market equilibrium diagram for goods market equilibrium. With consumption function. Okay, so let me draw the diagram, and using that diagram we can also derive the savings function. Okay, so there are going to be two diagrams. One is the diagram for consumption. So we have income demanded measured on the horizontal axis. We have the aggregate demand being measured on the vertical axis. Okay, remember our output is equal to the planned aggregate demand. So our desired line is ideally the 45-degree line. The feature of this 45-degree line is that all the points on this 45-degree line correspond to my output equal to my planned aggregate demand. That means for all the points on this line, y is equal to AD. All of us know the feature of a 45-degree line. A 45-degree line is like a mirror. Every point on this 45-degree line means that y is exactly equal to the aggregate demand. So this is the desired line, where the output we produce, y, is equal to the planned aggregate demand. But what is our actual aggregate demand? Remember, we don't have investment and government expenditure. We are assuming that there is no investment and government expenditure as of now. We are keeping the model simple. Only aggregate demand is coming from consumption. So my actual aggregate demand is exactly equal to the consumption function. How do I plot the consumption function? My consumption function is C bar plus Cy. So I can say that when y is 0, my C is equal to C bar. So when my y is 0, consumption is equal to some autonomous level of consumption C bar. And then if I take the derivative of consumption with respect to income, it is small c, which is lying between 0 and 1, because we have just learned that marginal propensity to consume lies between 0 and 1. So that means it's upward sloping. If the slope is positive, it's greater than 0, it's upward sloping. So this is my Keynes consumption function, C bar plus Cy. This is my autonomous consumption. Autonomous consumption, that level of consumption when income is 0. The slope of this consumption function is nothing but C. Okay, where is the goods market equilibrium happening? So this is my actual aggregate demand. The goods market is in equilibrium where actual and planned are equal. So at the point E0, the goods market is in equilibrium. Okay. And corresponding to it, I can derive the savings function. So this was diagram A. This was diagram A. I'm now drawing diagram B, which is the derivation of the savings function. So we have income here, we have savings here. The consumption function starts from C bar. The savings function starts from exactly the opposite, minus C bar. Remember, guys, the savings function we had derived minus C bar plus 1 minus Cy. So you can see that when income is 0, savings is negative, equal to the level of this savings. So this is my this savings. So basically, this gap is exactly equal to this gap. At the point E0, you can see at the point E0, consumption is exactly, this is the consumption line, this is the income line. At E0, consumption is equal to income, which implies consumption by income is 1. What was C by Y called? It was called APC. So I can write at the point E0, consumption is equal to income, which implies consumption by income is 1. And what is C by Y? APC. So at the point E0, I can write APC is equal to 1. If consumption is equal to income, it means savings is equal to 0, because we know that income is consumption plus savings. In the bracket, I can write since income is equal to consumption plus savings. So if consumption and income are equal, savings is 0. So I can map it down. My savings is 0. And what's the slope of the savings function? 1 minus C. So if I write ds by dy, if I differentiate this with respect to y, I get 1 minus C, which is again positive. That means my savings function is upward sloping. So this line at the bottom is my savings function. This is S is equal to minus C bar plus 1 minus Cy. It starts from the level of this savings, then my income is 0, and then it is an upward sloping line. You can see at the point E0, APC is 1. So APS, which is nothing but S by Y, is 0. Now you can clearly see to the left of E0, you can see that consumption is more than income. When consumption is more than income, savings is negative. Because you can see that Y is, again, everything boils down to this equation, Y is equal to C plus S. If consumption is more than income, savings has to be negative. Okay, and to the right of E0, you can see that to the right of point E0, income is more than consumption. If income is more than consumption, savings is positive. At the point E0, consumption is equal to income. So at the point E0, savings is exactly equal to 0. So I can, if to make it more clear, I can write all this. And after this, I am going to stop in this particular lecture. If I erase all this off, I can write that the explanation at, so I can say that in diagram A, the goods market is in equilibrium. The goods market is in equilibrium at the point E0, where the actual aggregate demand is equal to the planned aggregate demand, which is equal to the output, Y. Okay, so since the actual aggregate demand for now is only equal to my consumption, I can say that at the point E0, consumption is equal to income. Okay, therefore, at the point E0, savings is equal to 0. To the left of E0, to the left of point E0, consumption is more than income, which implies savings is negative, as you can see in diagram B. And to the right of E0, income is more than consumption, which implies savings is positive. So diagram A gives us the goods market equilibrium along with the consumption function. Diagram B tells us how you can derive the savings function from the consumption function. So this is where I intend to stop in this particular lecture. The objective of this lecture was to start the lectures on Keynesian economy, where we have looked at the goods market. Within the goods market, we have done in depth the consumption and the savings function today. Now, in the next lecture, I'm also going to add investment and government expenditure into the picture. And we are going to see how the goods market equilibrium will change when demand also comes from the firms and the government. So I stop in this lecture. I hope all students have enjoyed this lecture. Any doubt, you can unmute your mic and ask, or call up or mail me your doubts at divineschoolofelconomics@gmail.com. This is where I stop in this lecture.